All right. Hey, Kristen, this is Kyle.
Hey, Kyle.
So our GSI moderator is having an issue joining. Mike McGinn. Is there a way we can add him to this?
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
His name was listed on the previous one, but I don't see it on this one.
I've been on all the other three.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
So I'm working with her. Hopefully she'll
Okay.
let me rename myself again.
I'll send you.
Kristen, recording's already started. Is that right?
It is. We cut this beginning part out.
Oh,
It's
okay, good
easier
deal.
than having speakers remember to hit the record button.
Fair enough.
And I think I can add them in the back end. Just a moment.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. I think I'm in.
All right. Yeah, Mike, I'm gonna hang up on Teams then. It looks like you're in.
Okay, yeah.
Well, that was fast. I was going to tell you to refresh and that you should see it, but you already did. Good.
There we go. Okay. I will okay. I am are we do we have participants? Have they joined yet, or we're live
I
basically?
don't see any. Well, she said it's recording, but
Okay.
she'll cut everything out up until 2:15. But there's only the three of us.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, it's just the three of us. We're kind of in the green room. A minute till. So at 2:14, people will start to be able to.
I see. Okay.
It didn't look like too many were attended the last one, Mike.
Yeah, there were, yeah, maybe looked like 3 or 4, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We had a couple that were like 100 or something yesterday. But
Well,
not
sure.
all mine have been small.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
We have a lot of people who are going to be watching recordings after the fact too.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yep. Are you okay, Mike, if I delete your chats out of the Pathable?
Oh, yes, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead. I didn't. Yeah, good idea.
Okay.
I've got to grab a
Chris,
Start
I'll
with
go
the
ahead and
screen.
share my screen, make sure we're all good there.
See your screen.
So I'm gonna, if it's all right, I'm gonna leave it in this mode. I tried doing presentation mode or slideshow mode, but this drop down got in the way and would not go away.
Oh, that's weird.
It would not slide back up. So and it was covering up some of the data on my last one. So I had to pop out and kind of live time, frantically fix, or not fix, but try and get it to where they could see some of it. So anyway, I'm just gonna leave it in this mode if that's okay.
Sure thing.
Does anybody have a session ID you want me to add in here? I don't know that. Does that matter?
I don't think that matters. Let's
Okay.
see. Yeah, that's just like a back end. I can tell you what it is if you'd like.
Yeah, if it's not needed, I already deleted the text box. Don't worry about
Well, then there you go.
it.
I'm actually going to send you that session ID just in case people track it that way. I want them to be able to find this. So I'll send this to you.
I can even add the text box back in if you want. Want to read it to me? I can put it on here.
Oh, sure. 101,
Okay,
320.
fair enough.
Perfect.
Oh, see, it's sticking again. Why are you not going up? Get out of here. Yep, see, it's stuck. I don't get it. But it's not going to bother me since I'm in this mode, so I'll just leave it.
Let's do. Okay. I see we've got a couple people joined. We'll get started here in a moment. Let a couple more minutes for a few more people to join, and we'll get started. That works. Everything okay on your end, Kyle?
Yep, seems to be just the bar,
Okay.
but we're working around that, so no worries.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike McGann. I'm in marketing with GSI, and I'm very pleased this afternoon to welcome our main presenter, Kyle Gray. He is security manager, security and fraud with GSI, who will go over JDE row security, properly securing, managing your company and backup data. Before we get started, though, I do want to divert your attention to the safe harbor slide. Kyle, if you wouldn't mind shifting that next. There we go. Thank you. You all can go ahead and take a moment to read our safe harbor statement. Wonderful. Okay, now before we get started, also, there's a quick overview of today's meeting, which it's going to last about an hour. First, we would like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll turn it over to our presenter, who will go over the topic in great detail. I've already heard parts of it, and I think it's going to be one you're going to really find informative. If you, most people know how to do this, but just in case this is your first Zoom meeting or you need a refresher, feel free to ask questions during the presentation, but we ask you that you do so over the chat. And then those can pop up. It could be everyone. You could do it directly if you'd like, but we won't share those until the end of the presentation after Kyle's done. So, but we will have time for that. Also, what's new with this presentation is that GSI, no, you had the right, you had the right side. I was taking too long of a build up, Kyle, but we've got a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card just by clicking a link in the chat that I am sharing now. It's in the chat. You just click on the link and provide your name and email. And I'll let you take a minute or two just to, or just, well, 30 seconds just to do that here to give you a chance to give us your name. And you are actually, you're entered to win. So it's not guaranteed, but if there's you're only competing against 5 people right now. Oh no, we're up to 11 people minus Kyle and myself who would be going competing against you for the card. So you basically have a 1 in 10 chance right now of winning. So I encourage you to go ahead and fill that out now. I'll share the that will be shared. That'll stay active during the chat and we'll remind you at the end. So with that said, we'd like to really introduce ourselves as a company. Why partner with GSI? We're a full service ERP, SaaS, cloud, ITSM, cybersecurity reseller, consulting, and managed services organization. We use advanced ATI and automation in all of our products and services to help our clients reduce the total cost of ownership and increase ROI. We have offices nationwide and partners worldwide, which allows us to offer a 24/7 global support model. We've expanded over the years into other areas, other software, but JD Edwards is our bread and butter and our foundation, and it's what we do best. And that's coming from a HubSpot guy. These guys really know the JD Edwards stuff, and I've been it's been great to working with them and learning. People like Kyle just take a real pleasure in what they do, and you can tell they're passionate about how JD Edwards is. So yeah, we are also the only partner you'll find in the industry that has 100% guarantee on everything we do. So with that said, Kyle, if you're hopefully that's an esteemed enough introduction for you. I really appreciate your time today, and thank you all for joining us on the presentation. Take it away, Kyle.
Thanks, Mike. Yep, and as Mike said, thank you guys for joining today. As he said, put any questions throughout the presentation, put them in the chat. We'll try and address them later. If not, I do get sent those, so hopefully we can reconvene after if there's a possibility for that, or at least answer your questions. But today's agenda, it's majority of it is going to cover row security and that, but I do want to back up a second. The first bullet point here is we're just going to cover JD security, define it, and touch some of the main security types that will be mentioned today so that you have some knowledge or recognition of what's being mentioned. Then we will review and understand row security, so type 4. We're going to look at or discuss segregating your company and business unit access, how it should be, what's some good methods, precautionaries, those sorts of things. We'll look at exclusive app security. So basically for intercompany transactions and flows directly with row security. And then we'll look at the best practice row security model and Q&A to finish it up. All right, so about 25-30 minutes here. Let's get kicking. Maybe. So there we go. So again, we're going to define JDE security for you. So in its simplest form, it's basically how your JDE objects and data are secured and distributed to your users. The most high level description I can give you. There are multiple security types that grant differing types of access for your users. We're going to cover some of those here in a few minutes. And you may already know some, so we'll get through it fairly quickly, and then we'll get into our row security. Star public, star all controls the entire system and applies to all users. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. When a record is entered at star public, you can assure or be assured that it is applying to all users. Now, that or the switch can be flipped and things can be controlled at the user level and role. I just wanted to make sure we know our baseline here that Star Public is a system-wide access point. And I threw this on here just because it does flow with best practice models and that sort of thing, security models. It's the task view. If your task view is all over the place, I can most likely, at least assume that your access and your security model is probably a little all over the place too. So I like to put this in here just to help or to start if you need a starting spot, not necessarily with row security in general, but with your security model, start with the task view. Set it up so that it's that it has to do with your security model, your roles, and that the accessibility to all of your objects and how you want your users to access those. All right, so let's jump into a few security types. Security type 1, which I wouldn't have named it type 1 because this has to do it's really the secondary action security, but type 1 is action security. It determines what abilities or actions, if you will, you have once inside an application. It does not apply to UBEs or reports. So a little snippet down here, you can see that I've got a screenshot of one of our labs, and the star public star all setting is all yeses for action security. That is the opposite of what you want, but just because it's our lab, that we did that for a certain reason. The optimal or best practiced star public star record would be to have no, 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 yes, no, yes. So no to add, no to change, no to delete, yes, okay, no to copy, yes to scroll to end, or no to scroll to end, depending on how many records you have. Not too particular there, but it's basically giving you're saying if a user is able to get into an application and we have not defined action security in a role or at his user level, then it's going to go down to the star public, which again is the baseline of security for all users, and it's going to see, okay, you're going to gain inquiry access. Well, in this particular system here, any user that is not explicitly denied or has inquiry within a role or user level, they're going to inherit full access. So not necessarily what you want, but just wanted to point that out. Let's move on here. We're going to go to type 3, which when I mentioned a minute ago, I would have put this as type 1, but that's just me working over the years figuring out. Type 3 says application security. It determines or says whether you can open an application or UBE. So it doesn't matter what you can do inside the application yet. It wants to know, can you even click on it? If you go to click on the menu, your favorites, FastPath, wherever your BV, IV, wherever you're trying to access it from, do you have security records that grant you this access? Typically, again, sticking with star public, star all, you would want no for run and install. That's a closed system. Right here, you're looking at an open system. So, thinking of segregation of duties and compliance issues, which we're not going to get into too much, that would raise a very big concern. So type 3 application, can I get into the application or report? Type 5, we won't touch on this a lot today, but it is an important one. It's our data selection and processing option or PO security. It defines what your users or roles are able to do when running a UBE. So for instance, you can see all these down here, the no's and yeses. I'll just focus on each of the columns. You have the ability to change data selection or processing options. It can prompt for values, prompt for versions, prompt for data selection, full data access to data selection. So it can prompt, but it will not allow you to change or give you full access to it or modify it. So depending on if there are UBEs that you don't want your folks to, this usually happens in the finance realm, but that you don't want them adjusting, adding, changing any of the data selection. You want them to just see what it's reporting on so they can verify and then submit the report. You would need to set up type 5 security. Our big one that we're going to be talking about today is our type 4 data row security. You define how you want your company and business unit data segregated, and then how you want it to be access granted. So you can use a one-to-one or use a range. So you see the from and through values down here. This first line is indicating that this E1 user for this particular table can access, basically can change and view alias MCU for those company values, or excuse me, business unit. MCU is business unit. And there's differing lines down here, so you can see that they're trying to cover all the bases here. And we're going to get into what these records mean, the aliases, the tables versus star alls, those sorts of things. We're about to dive into that. So, and one more piece or type of security we're going to cover today, and it does directly relate, as I mentioned earlier, to row security. So we will cover that in a little bit more in depth than some of the others. But this is just basically continuing to segregate your company and business unit access. But it allows a user or a group of users, if it's assigned to a role, to process an intercompany transaction within a given application or UBE. So what I mean by that is, and we'll get into it, but from the high level here, you've got row security set up for user K Gray can access voucher entry. He has access to company 1, 2, and 3, and he's got the voucher entry role. But there's vouchers for company 5 that he needs to run a report for, or process a voucher for, of some sort. I'm not a JDE user, so I may be giving a rough example here, but follow along with me. So it's a company that he does not have security to. Using Type 9 security, it will override for the one application that you're putting it to. Now you can add more, but for this instance, we've only applied one. It's saying, I'm going to apply it, and I applied this to the voucher entry role. Anyone that has 04 VCH ENT, they will be able to perform any transaction, any business function need that they need within P4310 with any company's data. So it still restricts, but it's allowing them to process the, without opening up, if you will. So it allows them to finish the process or complete the process or move forward with the process in the application, but it does not open up row security and data and company security to them. So big key there. Only other way to do that without, if Type 9 was not a thing, if there was no intercompany transaction security, you would have to open up or give him a new role that granted him the access, him or her the access, and or remove row security records so that they have access to all to complete the transaction. So nice little feature. You get to keep your security intact, but allow a process to continue for a user or a group of users. All right. So we recapped JDE security quickly, went through some of the main types. You're going to see them mentioned here throughout the rest of the presentation here and there. So hopefully we'll have an understanding of what we're looking at. So let's take a deep dive into reviewing and understanding row security. Well, what is row security? It's type 4, like I mentioned in the security workbench, your P00950. The main purpose, honestly, is to secure, segregate, and define how you want your company's data accessed. There are some other intricacies that you can use for row security, but for the main purpose, again, it's your company, business unit, pertinent type data. There are 2 separate row security modes, inclusive or exclusive. You are either one or the other. And we'll look at how you check that and or change that here in a few minutes. And then security records are applied at the table. So for instance, the F0101, instead of applying it to the address book, the P01012. You apply it to the table level, and you always use an alias. You must use an alias, actually. The good thing about the tables is you can apply a star all tables, so for an alias, or you can use named tables. All right, row security, inclusive versus exclusive mode. How do we figure out what you have or what I have in my system? It's pretty simple. Go to P00950, go to the form exit, and you have an exclusive inclusive button. Click it, and it'll simply bring up this screen right here, the second screenshot, and it will have the radio checked for inclusive or exclusive. Our lab is inclusive, excuse me, and that is the JDE recommended best practice. We'll get into why here in a few minutes. But take a note here. You can see that inclusive row security allows database access for a valid range of values. We covered values in a second. We'll do it again. And then inclusive means you need to include, if you will, you need to include someone with the access. So assign them the access, grant them the access, meaning yeses. Exclusive row security, but you can guess where I'm headed here. It is excluding or blocking the access to the user. So that is a range of values identified within, so meaning no. All right. Continuing, there is another way if you don't have access to security workbench and you need to know, row security mode for some reason, then you can go to data browser UTB and in the FSATN3 column, as I have shown here, 0 is set to inclusive, 1 value is set to exclusive. And then you can see in the FS user that the word exclusive it fills in too. If the setting has never been applied, so basically you're operating in default exclusive mode because JDE does come default exclusive. Yep, they recommend inclusive, but it comes default exclusive. Then the entry FS user exclusive will not exist in your table. That means it hasn't been checked. It hasn't been selected. So you're operating in default mode. Okay. So I did cover this. Exclusive mode defines the range to be excluded. Anything not excluded is visible. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of row security records here in a few minutes, and you'll see what I mean. So again, you want to enter what you want hidden from your users. Inclusive is the opposite. Anything not included is hidden. They will not be able to see. So it's crucial to get your ranges correct, your one-to-one values, and so on and so forth. And depending on how many values and records and lines you need, how complex, I guess, your data structure, your company and data structure is in your system, that can be very crucial. Sometimes it's as easy as we've got 2 companies and we've got 5 business units in each. Okay, well, we're not going to have a lot of access roles needed, and we're not going to have a lot of access issues. But there's a company that I'm currently in a project with, and ironically, in the next couple of weeks, we have our row security meetings coming up. But there are 15 plus, as they call them, divisions or companies, and they have multiple, and I stress multiple MCUs or BUs, business units within each company. So it's going to be a much more complex model. There's going to be more records. And we'll get into why inclusive mode is better than or recommended over exclusive here in a few minutes too. It has to do with the number of records and so on and so forth. All right, so as mentioned, it's just a reiteration. It's inclusive is yes, exclusive you give them no's. Be careful to not switch the two. So if you're in inclusive, we shouldn't be having no records out there unless there are differing security needs within the same. So we're granting add, change, delete, and view to these 50 MCUs, but yet the 51 through 100 MCUs, we don't want anyone to delete in. Okay, so there's a no, but we don't want to dictate in inclusive mode. We don't want to dictate our users' access by no's. It doesn't work that way, and vice versa for exclusive. You need to dictate with no's and exclude people. You do not include people when you're in exclusive mode, vice versa. Okay. All right, so let's take a look here. This is I'm using the alias user here. You can see. So again, I mentioned an alias has to be entered here. It does not take star all. It won't let you do that. And here, this is an example of a named table. So we did the F986110. And we've applied that we can add, change, delete, and view for my user within that application. The only time you can use star all, which means everything, so you can't use it for alias, is object name. You can say for everywhere user is in the system, that alias is in an application, I want to grant access instead of naming it at the table itself. So you cover everywhere. And I'm going to get into a second, just give one example of a couple of data items and how many tables they reside in. You may actually be shocked there. So inclusive assumes no access unless explicitly granted yeses. This only this applies only to tables that you've applied row security to if using name tables. All right, so let's look at an exclusive mode security record. So I've got, we're using the table F0010, and that's most likely hit by the P0010, the companies. So here we are using the alias CO, which is company. We're not using user anymore, different alias. We are naming the table, like I mentioned, and here's where I mentioned entering some values. So you may be looking at this already and trying to figure out. If you're not, go ahead and do it, but we'll see it on the next slide. But what is this? What would this test role? It's a role. What would this role have access to from a company standpoint? So it's in exclusive mode because we know that because we're indicating access with no's. So we're saying 0 through 74 company, no. You don't have add, you don't have change, you don't have delete, and there's probably a column over here that says you don't have view. 101, the next line is 101 to 149. We're missing 75 to 100. So that means in inclusive mode, this role test has access to any data that has to do with companies 75 through 100 and 150 to 200. Anything else, this last line is 201 and higher, all the way to 99999, however many companies you have, they do not. If you're forgetting this last line and you're thinking, okay, I've done this, he's got his access to, he doesn't have 0 to 74, he has his 75 to 100, and he has now, because remember, let's act like this line right here is gone. 150 is not being blocked and above. So he or she would have his access, okay? But now we're not blocking anything above 200. So technically he would have more access than they would need. So it's very, just like it is with type 1 and type 3 and granting yeses and nos for getting into applications, and then what you can do when you're in the application action security, it's important to, especially from the data, the company and business data side, that's where a lot of your pertinent stuff, if someone can book a voucher that shouldn't too, okay. But here we're dealing with sensitive data most of the time, data that most people probably should not even be seeing or should not be accessing. So it is crucial to get those records correct. Okay, let's look at the difference. So every time a click is made in JDE Edwards, it sends a signal or to the server. There's a security kernel and SQL statements. I'm not a CNC person, so I'm giving you a very high level here, but let's look at what an inclusive SQL statement looks like versus an exclusive. And this ties into why JDE Edwards recommends, Oracle recommends, that inclusive mode is better than exclusive. So again, SQL statements where the magic happens. You click on it and it runs everything in the background to see what you have access to and what you don't. If the user has been restricted to these companies only, like we mentioned in our previous example, remember inclusive, now we're granting yeses. So we grant what we want him or her to see, not the exclusive version. This is what the SQL statement looks like in the background. Okay, you know anything about them? You know what you're looking at here. You know what it means, and that's what it's processing in the back. It's simple as that with inclusive mode. Exclusive mode, let me jump back up here for a second. You also see that there's less records here. Same exact amount or level of access being granted, whether in inclusive or exclusive, but there's less lines needed, less data lines, less security record lines, less lines in your, like I said, in your security workbench that could be cluttering, could be causing issues. This is where the performance comes in. So let's go back down here. Exclusive, there's 3 records. Now this is a very minimal example, but you can see if there's a complex row security, data security model at your company, then you'll have multiples line. I mean, multiple lines. Anywhere one role could have anywhere from 10, 15, 20 plus, depending on the level of access that they need, how segregated it has to be, so on and so forth. So here you see an additional lines needed to grant the exact same access. And here's the SQL statement. Again, small example, but you can tell the SQL statement is even longer. So it's just more processing in the background that is happening. Lag time in your system, lag time when processing transactions. So it's from Oracle's standards, that is the base reason why inclusive is preferred or recommended over exclusive. Comparing the two together real quick, you can see it on the lines on the same slide here. Couldn't get the words out. You can see it's longer. I mean, it's about twice as long, to be honest, and you only added one more line. So think about if you're adding, you know, exclusive, inclusive, and you have a robust system or complex row security, you got 8 lines. Exclusive, you may have 15 to 20 or more. So the SQL statement grows, and it causes issues. You do have to have the complex. This little example, if our system was as simple and designed as this at a company, then we probably wouldn't need to be worrying about it, to be honest. But complex systems, it does matter. There are lag times that people, you know, companies think it has to do with the servers, the space. Again, not a CNC person. Whatever they need to do to buffer and give more space to amp up the speed doesn't necessarily work, because it has to do with the inclusive versus exclusive mode. So again, just touching on that so that you have the ability, you know, authority, the wherewithal to go check and see what you have, and then maybe look and see how you're using and implementing row security. Is it correct? Are you using it in the correct manner? Could this potentially be the reason why you've got some access issues or delay issues when it comes to processing in the system? So, all right, let's look at some of the row security implementation best practices. So we looked at the 2 modes in detail. We described them, described how implementing or what an implemented exclusive or inclusive mode looks like. You know, let's just discuss now some of the best practices. So first and foremost, the best practice for setup, you have to enable your aliases. So your MCU, your CO, your user, all of the alias in the system. Whenever you want to use one, it has to be enabled for row security use. How you do that is through the data dictionary, the P92001. If the alias is not enabled, you will get a red hard stopping error if you try to enter row security. It will say row secure or data dictionary item not set up for row security use. So if you get that, it's not too big of a deal. It sure looks like it in JDE Edwards. It sends up the red flags, and it's got a lot of, you know, words that make it look like it's a huge issue. It's not necessarily. It just needs to be set up. So, but it does require a full server package be deployed for any releases of JDE 8.12 and later. Any earlier, it just requires a web package. Secondly, setting up wise, you need to know, you can't move forward until you know what the business needs, and if you already have row security implemented, where you're at currently. You know, what was the baseline behind what you currently have set up? What drove that? And does that make sense now? Did it make sense then? So analyze how you're currently set up and how it needs to be segregated. So again, if no role or no user role level is access is granted or denied, users have full access to records, inclusive or exclusive. So be careful there. And it's only restricted when you have those roles or the user level records for yeses or nos, depending on your mode. Continuing with best practices. I just mentioned something about, you know, whether you have roles or user level. Access should really be granted via roles. It's acceptable to have them at the user level, but they tend to become an issue with what the user has, because we're applying it at the user level. We might have multiple MCUs, multiple COs. It can get dicey at the user level. And that's for type 1, type 3, that's for any type of security. It really should be contained within roles. So not only that, but these roles should be designated to row security only. And that's from past experience here. They should not be included with your transactional access or your process-based roles. So for instance, your roles that grant your application type 3 and your action type 1 security. can I get into and what can I do in PO 411 voucher entry? That access should be in a separate role than your row security. Can I access company one data? Bottom line, you will notice and have much better results by using roles only. Use all to all and blanks to blanks. It took me a long time to figure this out, and what these meant and why access issues we were having, because the user had the company access, but there are aliases and fields and data in there that have blank values or all values. So these ranges, if having these ranges in there in your row security roles, your row security model, these ranges cover aliases that incorporate alpha and blank values. So it allows for restriction for undefined non-numeric values. So the instances or the examples I just showed you a minute ago, screenshots, those were numeric. They were all numeric. I didn't have the blanks and alls in there because we weren't here yet, to be honest. But I wanted to show you that if there were any of those aliases, those tables that have blank values or all values, and we were expecting a user to be secured out, it wouldn't. So it's crucial to have these two. A couple of examples of where these are used. So AAIs, F0012 uses blanks. If you don't have, so if you granted somebody row security access to company 2 and they take care of AAIs, so on and so forth, again, not a JDE user, and you do not have the blanks to blanks in the from and through values for that alias in that table, they're going to have issues. Branch plant constants, the F41001, that uses all and blanks. So again, if you don't have those records, issues are going to be present. And then scheduled jobs, this is a big one. P91 300, it uses blanks. If you don't have that record in there, then your scheduled jobs may not be running properly, may not be reporting on the data or updating. I mean, that's even more important. It's you have updatable UBEs that are jobs that are running overnight, and it may not work properly. You'll know, but you know that I'm just letting you know that these here, the alls and the blanks, very crucial. And as I mentioned, errors and access issues will occur if the values are not present. Okay, continuing with some best practices. We're going to kind of recap some here. Row security can be applied 2 different ways. It can be applied in name table or star all tables. I know I mentioned that earlier. If you apply it to, the name table, for instance, F0101 or the F0911, you are only securing that table. And remember, you can't use star all for alias, so you're only securing that alias for that table, which is fine a lot of the time. Sometimes you don't care what that alias is anywhere else. You just need to control it within that one application / field or table, excuse me, the F0101, F0911. But there's instances where you need to know, for instance, tax ID, any of the other pertinent aliases, MCUs. I know we use those at star all at some points, depending on the table. But apply star all tables to the alias. So for instance, tax ID, anywhere tax ID, that one really needs to go at star public. Star public, no, you can't view, you can't change, you can't add, you can't delete. And then you grant back that access via a role, again, or user level, but preferably role. Star all is recommended to help cut down on records in the system. So if it is applicable to apply it to all tables, do so. That way you don't have to name the tables. And we're going to get to how many tables over here on the right. And you must, as I mentioned, you must include an alias. You can't have it blank, you can't have it star all. One of the other best practices and tips, identify your alias and know where it resides. A lot of folks say, oh yeah, I've got tax ID locked down. That's no problem. We're in control of our business units and our companies. Well, MCU, for instance, MCU is used in roughly 1,245 tables in JD Edwards. So if you're not using star all, you have to name 1,245 tables. Again, it depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. This isn't a high level overview example, but you get what I'm saying is that there are aliases are used all over JD Edwards, the same ones all over. So how can you figure that out? And for instance, companies in 750. How do you figure that out? You can leverage the cross-reference to identify where aliases are used. And if it's a company-wide, issue and that we need to shut it down at all tables, then use star all. If not, you got to identify the tables. But luckily, they do give you that flexibility. All right, and let's take a look at, I mentioned earlier, your type 1 and type 3 star all or star public star all. It's kind of your all doors closed or all doors open system. Well, you can create that same type of thing with row security. So no matter if you're in exclusive or inclusive, here's what your records would look like. So we're using the alias MCU here, but to create a deny all and then grant back approach for row security in exclusive mode, the records would look like this. You would have blank, to all Z's, and be all no's. Then at that point, you're able to create your roles, and you actually grant back. You still use no's. I'm sorry, that's a different alias. If you're in another alias, you use no's. MCUs, because you're locked down now, you need to grant them back. So it is kind of like your deny all grant back. Inclusive mode, you do not need values. Inclusive mode does not require values when using star all. It does if you're using a name table, but for this instance, MCU, star all, you do not need values. This record right here would create a closed system. I do not recommend implementing either of these records without vetting what you have first, because just like type 1 and type 3, if you were to, let's say you're in an open system, if you were to close your system down, you're going to have potentially, depending on how your roles are set up, mass quantities of access issues. So it needs to be vetted, it needs to be tested, and so on and so forth. Same for row security. You're basically flipping the switch if you're already implemented. Let's say you're in open and you want to close it down, you're flipping the switch. So you need to be careful and vet your processes here. But the good thing is you do have the capability of doing that. That basically says implementing one of these two records, no matter the mode, that you are confident and you have to have a role or a user level record assigned to grant you some access. You're not just inheriting it. All right, so let's look at some best practice precautions. So let's avoid, first one is conflicting records. You want to avoid having roles assigned that grant different access for the same alias. So if you have signing in with star all roles is where this can be an issue, because the security hierarchy takes over. So just like type 1 and type 3, if you've got a role that says no, I can't get into PO411, and then another role that says yes, I can get into PO411, whatever role has the higher sequence number is going to allow you or give you the proper security. So if the no has the higher role sequence, then you will not have, even though you have another role assigned that says you can access PO411, you won't be able to when logging in with star all roles. There is a role chooser that you can enable, that most companies do have enabled, that allows people to log in with a single role. So basically bypasses your star public security, if you will, or any other role defined security that are out there. So just be careful. You really should have, unless there's differing needs, you should have your access within a single role. I understand there are needs for multiple roles, but you should have it within a single. Avoid applying row security within your transactional or process-based roles, like I mentioned earlier. 04 voucher entry should not have any row security applied to it. Role RSCO15 or CO1, which means row security company 1, that role should have all of our row security, and vice versa. Your row security role should not have application and action security access in them. They should be segregated. Some row security exceptions here. The F98 OWSEC, you can try, but it won't do it. You cannot apply security to that table. It's an authentication table. It holds authentication information. So the security kernel basically ignores any row security if it's applied at this table. Search types. So for instance, address book. This is one that people have some issues with. For instance, you would assume, or following most of the program to table flow, that address book here, PO1012, would have FO1012. Well, it's not. It hits the FO101. phones, so updating a phone number, that's the FO or FO115, who's who, all of this is managed within this application right here. In a row of form exit off of it, but they hit different tables. So again, row security is table driven. We can't apply it to PO1012. We apply it to the tables. So we got to make sure with these types of search types that we cover all of the tables that they hit. All right. So again, we've looked at security types. We looked at row security modes, and we took a little bit of a dive into how to or what types of things to look into, best practices for row security. Now, earlier I mentioned exclusive application security. So this is different than type 3 application security. It's exclusive application security type 9. This is driven or derived or created for intercompany transactions. You solely, and you can use the cross-reference to identify those, kind of like you can the aliases. It allows for row security to be overlooked within the defined application, meaning, as said a little bit earlier, you've got a user that has access to company 1, but he processes a report, or he runs a report, or processes a part of a transaction that has to go across another company. It go company 2, 3, doesn't matter, just not company 1. He's going to get an error, a business function error, or the function will not complete. Unless one of two things: he has company 2 or 3 access, whatever company it crosses over, which he's not supposed to have. So we can't really grant him that. Now, this is where exclusive app comes in. You assign it, whatever application it is. So if, again, our example from earlier, P4310, and we're trying to, we need to get in there and process something that will overlook row security, we simply apply a type 9 security record for that user or role. This is where user can be effective for these records, because they are very simple single line records. Or if it's a process, so anyone who has voucher entry needs to be able to, process these company 3, data voucher, whatever. I'm not a JDE user, sorry. But what that'll do is you can apply it to the role. So user or role, and at the application, not the table. And you can apply it to Star Public. Normally you will not, because these are intricacies within the JDE process flows and transactions. So you don't, but you have the flexibility to. And like I said, you apply this in a transactional role. You don't need a new role. You can do user level. You don't need a new role for this. And you don't apply it in your row security role. You apply it in the transactional role. That gives them the access they need. So for instance, 09 JRN ENT, which is journal entry, would have a type 9 record for PO911, meaning they need to enter journal entries or process journal entries, edit, whatever it may be, for company 2, but yet we're not giving them access to company 2 data in the system anywhere else, so on and so forth. And again, do not apply it as a row security role. Exclusive app security only works with row security. It doesn't work with any other type of security, type 3, type 1. There's no other overrides that this does. This is meant for row security and the transactional process flows behind the scenes within your system and strictly related to your data. Okay, so here's another snippet of what it looks like. Again, with this one, we applied at the user level, or the role level, excuse me. We can apply at the user. And this one is for P4310. You can see security type 9, and we simply just give it a run. That means they can do whatever they need to do in there. And since this record is here, it will bypass row security to process what they need to. One thing here, even though it says application security, this does not grant them access to P4310. It's the yes that overrides the row security in this application. If they do not have type 3 application security to where they can get into P4310, this record is almost meaningless. They need to have type 3 security to it, so they need to be able to get into the application, and then this record is what overrides it. So big point there. Just wanted to kind of hammer that down. All right, so let's talk about some implementation planning. So row security implementation plan. Define how data needs to be segregated. Company, business unit, object account. If multiple levels of access needed, be sure to create separate roles. You know, don't have the access within a single role unless it, you know, if it can, it's fine, but typically you're going to run into some issues. So, you know, have separate roles that you can disperse out to your user base however need be. If possible, lock down at star public. Determine common and you know, company-wide CO or MCU values. If there are any, you know, sometimes you know, I have a client right now, they have a legacy company that they keep data in that everybody in the company needs to look at. That's company one for them. They allow that at Star Public. They give it to everyone. They let everybody view and see that data. That's a perfect example of cutting, using Star All and Star Public to cut down on the amount of records, roles, assignments, so on and so forth that you have to have in your system. And then again, define tables that need to be secured. You know, if we can secure them Star All, great. If not, then we need to specify our name, the name tables. And more importantly, we have to figure out what aliases are a part of which tables. Determine your value, your from and through ranges. This is important. So it can be broken down by, let's say, region, site, department, you know, state, province, wherever you're located, whatever your type of business is and how your company's segregated. That's how it, you know, that's how typically the model you should follow. And bringing or hammering down the point of, you know, cutting down in your records, only get as granular as you need. It's good to get granular sometimes, you know, and sometimes you can get too granular, which again, in row security can cause access issues or systematic processing issues. So less is more sometimes, especially when it comes to row security. Avoid mutually exclusive settings. So that means, for instance, I saw a company that had records for company 100 and MCU 250, but MCU 250 is not part of 100. So I'm not really sure why it was there, but it was causing an issue when they were trying to process some transactions and data. So, you know, make sure your MCUs are truly a part of that particular company if you are implementing company and business unit data within the same role. Like I said, it will cause errors. And then finally here, last point is, and this is going to go with any security recommendation, webinar, info that we provide, any changes you're making in the system, test, test, test. Implement your changes in a test environment. Make sure that they work properly. You know, you can complete transactions as you would expect, and that more importantly, that your users do not have access to the data that they're not supposed to. Again, have your users test their access, and do not implement or promote to PD until thoroughly tested and signed off. We've seen this a few times where, and it may just been the not knowing exactly what was going on or what needed to be done or what the repercussions were, but you do only have one security table. So, well, most of the time you can have multiple, but most of the time when you apply security, you're applying it in all environments. But through the use of roles and the environments assigned to those roles, that's how you can segregate access and test things. So if you're newly implementing or changing your row security model, create roles, assign DV, PY, QA, test, whatever your test environment is. Don't give it production, and then you're not harming anything production-wise. So test, test, test. Yep, and I do believe, that was it. So, all we can stress is row security is a fickle beast. It is, and it can be, depending on how you're using JD Edwards and from a company business alias standpoint. If there's any help ever needed, please reach out. If it's something you can't figure out, something you need assistance planning, and then you'll take the duties on, we'll be more than happy to help in that realm too. But I just stress that be careful making these types of changes in the system. Going in and flipping the switch from exclusive to inclusive is not just as easy as flipping the button or clicking the button. You do click the button, but depending on what records you already have in there, you've kind of mixed up your system now. So just be careful. And I appreciate everyone's time today. Mike, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. And I'm going to segue with that. One of our first questions is about that exclusive and inclusive. So the first question is, if I'm currently in exclusive mode and want to switch to inclusive, what kind of effort is my company looking at?
Okay, so fair enough. I'm gonna say it depends, but
Yeah.
honestly, if you have row security implemented and you flip that switch, you most likely or may experience issues.
Uh-huh.
So vet what security records you currently have out there. So if you're in exclusive mode and everything's being blocked with no's, well, now we need to, and we're going to inclusive, we need to change those records to the right values from and through and to the yeses. And there we've then flipped our system. So not too difficult. It just takes some analyzing and some correcting of some security records to flip the switch. Again, be careful so that you don't press the button, save it. You have to deploy the package. So if that's not done, technically it's not taking effect. But yes, the effort overall, it's not huge. It just is peculiar. It's precautionary effort.
Gotcha. Yeah. There's another question too, is asked about if I've implemented row security to the best of my knowledge, and my users are still able to perform functions on that data, what should I do to ensure data is secure?
That's a good question. It could be a couple of things, but the first areas that I would start is one, look at your records for whatever company or business unit or alias, I guess, if you will, that are out there. Look at the roles that are assigned to the user and assess, are those values and those ranges there make sense? Next thing is the all to all and the blank to blanks. Remember, there are aliases that support blank values and all values. If those records are not in your row security roles or in any of the security makeup for that matter, then they're going to have issues, because it's not, you have to have a security in JDE Edwards, you got to have a security record to have access in a closed system, so on and so forth. If you don't have those records, most likely they're going to experience some issues when trying to deal with blanks and those sorts of things. If it is a defined value, so a certain company, again, look at those records and look at what other roles the user has too. Remember, role hierarchy plays here. So you may have two roles that are assigned, and one may have a higher sequence number. You need to adjust that. You need to remove one of the roles so the user has the proper access, so on and so forth.
Wonderful. Well, I've got one more question before I share that. I do want to remind you guys that we have a Amazon card drawing, and I'm sharing the link one more time if you have any problems with the form, but feel free to enter that. Last question I had, and then we'll let everybody head out a little early, depending on how long you answer. But this is just kind of a big picture question. But will applying row security have negative effects to transactional data? So I guess that's pretty specific, but yeah, just applying row security will have negative effects to transactional data.
It definitely can. Again, if you're not if you don't have any row security right now, or you're implementing new row security, and a process, and you assign it to a user and a process flows over another company, the exclusive app security type 9, the things are going to start not completing, or going to get some random errors that are starting to pop up, and you're going to be wondering why. So yes, it can. Depending on the complexity and the certain types of records that you're implementing, there can be issues. So again, look at the records that we're implementing, make sure they make sense, make sure the values are there, the aliases, tables, so on and so forth. And look for the alls to alls, the blanks to blanks, and look for multiple roles causing issues. Other than that, transactional wise, it's going to be self-explanatory. If you're granting someone company 2 and they're trying to book a voucher to company 3, 4, 5, whatever, it's not going to work. So it's pretty self-explanatory in that manner. So hopefully, that answer made sense. There's always a little bit of an asterisk with these types of things, because it just depends on how you're using JDE Edwards and what type of security you're trying to implement. So as it is with any type of security, stop, think about it, ask questions if you have to, because changing security that we don't know could have a trickle effect that you may not see for a while. So just vet, discuss, plan, then implement.
I think that sounds like pretty good advice. So we are going to wrap up here at this point. And everyone, we really appreciate your attendance and your time today. Sharing Kyle's email on the chat as well. If you have additional follow-up questions, I'm sure he'd love to break something down for you a little more if you have some something to talk about. And again, thank you, everyone. Any last words, Kyle?
No, I just reiterate what you just said, Mike. If there are any questions, anything didn't make sense, because I know we only have an hour for this, and I have to go through our topics fairly quickly, please, by all means, reach out. Be more than happy to even just answer an email or pick up a phone call. Be happy to. So I'd much rather do that than to see you try and do something on your own, and next thing you know, we got a kind of a debacle on the hands. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for your time, and I hope it was educational.
All right, everyone. Thanks. Have a great rest of the conference, and we'll see everyone soon.